The Hoop Heads Podcast is brought to you by Head Start Basketball.
Hey Hoopheads! Wanted to take a minute to shout out our partners and friends at Dr. Dish Basketball. Their Dr. Dish shooting machines are undoubtedly the most advanced and user-friendly machines on the market, and they truly accelerate skill development faster than ever. Learn more at drdishbasketball.com and follow their incredible content at Dr. Dish B-Ball on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Mention the Hoopheads podcast and save an extra $300 on the Dr. Dish Rebel, All-Star, and CT models. Also, make sure to check out the new Dr. Dish Home Machine, which is perfect for these crazy times when gyms and schools are closed. Visit drdishbasketball.com for details. That's a great deal, Hoopheads. Get your Dr. Dish shooting machine today.
Hi, this is Coach Lionel Garrett from Wilberforce University, and you're listening to the Hoop Heads Podcast.
Hey Hoopheads, we all hate ankle sprains, and they happen way too often. Ankle injuries are the #1 sports-related injury. Arise is trying to change that. With the iFast, your athletes get preventative protection and full mobility. Athletes no longer need to wear bulky braces that limit performance and give mediocre protection. Anyone playing sports should be using these products. Keep your athletes in the game. Don't wait for them to get hurt to take action. Visit www.arise.com, spelled A-R-Y-S-E, and use the code HOOPHEADS to get 20% off the future of performance. That's ARYSE.com with promo code HOOPHEADS to get 20% off.
I'll explain the whole recruiting calendar. I'll explain how to use the different social media outlets, and not only how to use them, but how to use them properly.
Tobias Pinson is the founder and CEO of Hoop Juice Recruiting Service. Hoop Juice helps female players distribute their talents to college coaches throughout the United States. Tobias was previously an assistant coach of the women's basketball program at the University of Charleston during the 2018-2019 season. Prior to Charleston, he has been an assistant women's basketball coach at Winthrop University, USC-Upstate, Walsh University, and Converse College. Pinson was named a top 30 under 30 assistant coach by the Women's Basketball Coaches Association in 2018. This prestigious award was created to recognize 30 up-and-coming women's basketball coaches aged 30 and under at all levels of the game. Tobias has also been a speaker for the Women's Basketball Coaches Association at numerous Final Four national conventions as well. Tobias played collegiate basketball at Spartanburg Methodist College and Winthrop University. The highlight of his playing career came during the 2012-2013 season at Spartanburg Methodist College when his team finished 35-1 and advanced to the Final Four. Don't miss our free Hoopheads Pod webinar series on Thursday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern. If you miss a live webinar, you can buy lifetime access to any of our previous webinars for $4.99 on the Hoopheads Pod website. If you're focused on improving your coaching and your team, we've got you covered. Visit hoopheadspod.com/webinars to get registered. Make sure you check out our Hoopheads Pod network of shows, including Thrive with Trevor Huffman, Beyond the Ball, the CoachMaze.com podcast, Players Court, Bleachers and Boards, and our team-focused NBA podcasts, Cavaliers Central, Grizz and Grind, Nuck If You Buck, The 305 Culture, and Blazing the Path. We're looking for more NBA podcasters interested in hosting their own show centered on a particular team. Shoot an email to info@hoopheadspod.com if you're interested in learning more and bringing your talent to our network. Listen and learn from our conversation with Tobias Pinson, founder and CEO of Hoop Juice. Hello and welcome to the Hoopheads Podcast. It's Mike Klinzing here with my co-host Jason Sunkel. And tonight we are pleased to welcome to the podcast from Hoop Juice Recruiting, Tobias Pinson. Tobias, welcome to the Hoopheads Pod.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited to be on, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We are excited to have you on, get a chance to dig into what you've been able to do and build with Hoop Juice. I want to start by going back in time to when you were a kid. Talk to us a little bit about your first experiences in the game of basketball.
Oh man, going way back there. I guess to start out, man, I originally started playing baseball when I was younger. My dad was a big softball guy when he was alive. He was a basketball player growing up in high school, and I think he always had a baseball itch. So he tried to drive me towards baseball growing up. But naturally, all of my friends were playing basketball, and I was playing both in rec league, in middle school, and high school. So I just kind of fell in love with the game of basketball and decided to fully pursue that. Probably starting my 8th grade year. I just dived in with that.
What was it about the game of basketball that ultimately made you choose that over baseball?
Good question. I would say really just, it's more action. Like to this day, I really can't even watch a baseball game on TV. It's just super slow for me, personally. But just the action of basketball and baseball was really good, but basketball always wasn't the best player, so I felt challenged when I was out there as a kid. I was always tall, so obviously stuck in the post at a young age. So I always had a lot to work on, my handling, my decision making, and so on and so on. So I think the challenge of it kind of drew me towards it.
So when you first decided that you were going to start to focus on basketball, what did that look like for you? How did you go about improving your game, working on it? What did you do summertime, in between seasons, to try and improve the skills that you were just talking about?
Good question. I would say I really started working on my game going into the summer of my 9th grade year. My dad was a very dominant personality, which I have some traits of that. He really drove hard baseball on me, like really pushed it on me. And I think he may have pushed me away from it a little bit. God bless his soul. But I think he took the opposite approach with basketball, whereas he wanted me to enjoy it, wanted me to keep doing it, and allowed me to be coached by other people. So really, honest with you, I started watching this guy named Dre Baldwin on YouTube. Watched a lot of his stuff, and I family member who's like a brother to me, put me through some workouts named Antonio Hargrove. So between him and YouTube, that's why I learned.
It's funny because obviously the era that you grew up playing basketball in, being able to have those types of resources when you talk about YouTube and being able to have a trainer. I'm a little bit older than you, so I cracked the 50 mark this year. And for me, there was none of that. And that's one of the things that I'm jealous about, kind of the era that kids grow up in today, is there's so many opportunities for you to get better, whether that's through watching YouTube videos or access to trainers. And there's so much more access to gyms. I think I missed out on, and kids miss out today on, some of the playground basketball that I get to play. But I think there's a huge benefit to kids being able to find things that they can work on and improve, and have access to trainers and have access to videos. And you can learn from some of the best coaches and trainers in the world just by going in and going on your computer. So when you got and started taking the game more seriously, what were some of the things that in high school you remember in terms of your favorite memories of playing high school basketball?
Oh, that's a deep question right there. I could go a bunch of different ways with that, all the way back from playing travel basketball. This is when the AAU Nationals was a big thing to go to, which I know there's a bunch of independent stuff going on. So went to that 3 times. High school basketball, so many memories there. Always got really close to the Final Four. Never cracked it. Got there twice my sophomore and junior year. High school basketball and just really playing pickup basketball. Man, you really can't find it. I graduated in 2011. So I would say probably 2 or 3 years after that, you really couldn't find people playing pickup basketball outside, I should say. I really, really enjoy that to this day. And I say I'm from Greenville, South Carolina, so I just to put a specific map on that. But yeah, really just playing pickup basketball. I just miss the games, the competitiveness. Obviously, I always playing with older guys, so they're a little bit stronger and faster than me, so I had to think my way through things. So
let me ask you this. As a younger guy, what do you think has led to the demise of playground pickup basketball outdoors? Why do you think it's gone away? I'm just curious.
Good question, man. I think there's more accessibility to gyms now. I think around 2010, 2011, that's kind of, we had that mixtape YouTube era. We got a lot of high school coaches. There's honestly a lot more money involved in travel basketball, so those travel guys are more opportune to open up the gym for their guys to try to get people to play for their program. So honestly, I think just more gyms are open in general. Obviously out before the pandemic, but yeah.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that the amount of gym access, I think about when I was a kid, and it was almost impossible to get into any gym, even with your high school coach. Gyms just were not open. And so you were kind of left with, I got to play in the driveway, or I got to go find a playground somewhere where I can play against good competition. Whereas now, whether you're a high school player, a lot of times high school coaches are open up the gym, not only for their own players, but even for the junior high, middle school players in their community. And then you think about all the travel basketball and AAU. And as you said, the fact that it's become a business has motivated the adults who have the keys to the gym to open those gyms up, because it's become clearly a business for everybody. And it's one of the things that I'm sad about. I think there's a lot of positives to kids being able to have access to gyms and trainers and all those good things that come along with the system today. And yet I still feel bad, just like you said, how you miss that playground basketball and getting out and playing. I feel the same way. And not even so much for me, because I got to experience it, but I think kids today missing out on that. It's one of the things that, forget about what it did for you as a player, improving your game. I think the bottom line is, when you think about playing basketball on the playground, it was just fun. And that's what I miss more than anything.
Oh, yeah, 100%, man. I also think you build a competitive edge. Just going to different neighborhoods, you and your guys in your neighborhood trying to take over the court that day. And like you said, man, that gym access was different back then in 2011, where in my hometown, we had a recreation center. They would always pull up volleyball net in the half court, so we could never pull a full court, which was insane. We would offer to take it down, set it back up, give our keys, give our phones, whatever. Just never would get with it. So obviously, I think nowadays that would never fly.
Yeah, that would not fly anymore. Let's put it this way: if you are the owner or a school district and you have a gym and you're not utilizing that to sort of fund your athletic department, you're probably missing out on a great opportunity, because again, there's so much demand, as you know, for youth and AAU basketball, and people trying to go out there and improve and get better and help kids get, improve their stock and maybe get an opportunity to play college basketball, which leads me to my question about your experience in high school and when you started thinking about the opportunity to play college basketball. When did that get on your radar as a realistic goal of something that you wanted to do?
Well, I think probably when I was in 7th, 8th grade, something I had always thought about, because I grew up in government housing, so college was always something I knew about to get to be my ticket out. And I looked at basketball, okay, I'm solid in this. I got a lot of areas to improve. I improve on this, I can get there. And then going into high school, my senior year, I had one Division II scholarship offer from Anderson University. But I also knew I didn't want to go to a school that I didn't feel comfortable with and would be happy at. And it had nothing to do with the coaching staff or the program. I just didn't see myself being happy there and being able to complete 4 years. I didn't want to be a dropout. So I actually ended up going to Winthrop University, and I was just going there as a regular student. Got to the institution, started playing pickup in the gym. Obviously, thought I was done with basketball, but had an itch for it. Started playing pickup with the team. I'm like, man, I'm not too far behind from these guys. Like, I can hang with them. Then I got the itch to it. And they invited me to their private open gym, which is at the arena. Started playing in there, and then I found my way to talk with the coach. And got the opportunity to walk on my freshman year at Winthrop.
That's cool. Did you have to go through a tryout process? Because I'm always curious about. I love talking to guys who walked on at a Division I program and just hearing the different stories of what the tryout was like for the walk-ons who were attempting to make the team.
Well, I got a story for you.
All right, I'm ready.
So I played for head coach Randy Field, man. Awesome guy. And my first 2 weeks, I wouldn't talk to him. Obviously, I had the guys on the team vouching for me. I was 6'5", could shoot a little bit, drive a little bit. Provided some value, whether it was in practice. Didn't play a lot, but my first 2 weeks of full-court tryouts was just me running with the team, conditioning in the morning, and lifting weights. I did no individuals, no basketball stuff. So I was just sitting there watching the basketball stuff. And back then, I didn't understand that. But now, looking back, having been a former college coach, he was just testing me to see if I really wanted to play. So I went through 2.5 weeks of strength, conditioning, lifting weights, and I was having to do basketball stuff on my own at the studio, just to maintain that. So when the time came for me to go through some dribbling drills and some shooting drills, I was ready. So handled that, and the way I found out on the team, I made the team was on picture day. The manager, Joe, I think it's Joe Van Testen, he ended up, he used to pick us up and drive us to practice and stuff. Because none of us had a car as freshmen. He was like, yeah, man, here's your jersey, here's your stuff. I was like, I made the team. Nobody gave me that news, man, because I hadn't dribbled or anything yet. So, yeah, it was a pretty interesting day there. So, excited for me. I saw my name with my picture planted on the locker, my hometown and stuff. So, pretty cool day.
That's awesome. I'm assuming since those guys had kind of took you under their wing and brought you into the open gyms that they were having in the arena, I'm assuming that your relationship with the players was pretty good since you had a previous relationship with them kind of heading into the tryouts.
Oh, yeah, the relationship was awesome, man. All the guys were helpful. Everybody was working hard, wanting to win. There was no animosity. I mean, they were clearly ahead of me skill-wise. I was just happy to be there. My first time, I don't know if you consider flying out of the country, but I got to go to the Virgin Islands. I mean, I went a lot of places my freshman year. I never had a chance. Probably would have never had a chance to visit in my life before that. So.
What was your favorite place you went?
During that season? Definitely the Virgin Islands. Like we went the week before Thanksgiving break, and then we had the whole Thanksgiving break off after that. And I'm sure the coach scheduled the design it like that so we could practice us like crazy. But it was an awesome experience for the Virgin Islands to be down there for 7 days. Really, obviously I was a practice player, so I really had no game responsibility, so I was having a good time.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'd say that's one of the things about having a college basketball career. I think about some of the places that I got to go and play, and places that you're not sure if you ever get back to. And I know, like, I went to New York City when I was playing in college, and I haven't unfortunately been back since. I've been to a lot of places around the country, but haven't been back to New York. And the other place that I went that really made an impression on me was Boise, Idaho. So kind of two sort of completely different ends of the country, but two places that were very unique in their own way. And again, like as you said, they're experiences that you just don't get if you're not having an opportunity to play college basketball. So after you get done and you play at Winthrop, I know you had an opportunity to play a little bit at Spartanburg Methodist as well. So tell us a little bit about that, because I'm assuming there you that you got an opportunity to play a little bit.
Freshman year, he ended up offering me, hey, but he informed me that I wouldn't. I had that itch, man. I sat on the bench.
Right.
I've never done that in my life. Like, let's see what I can do at like the D2 level. I ended up going to Spartanburg Methodist to play for head coach Jeff Brookman. And we had a loaded team, man, super loaded team. We went 35-1. So what happened was we made the Final Four and ended up losing in the Final Four of the National JUCO tournament. And the way the junior colleges had it set up is if you lose in that Final Four game, you can play for third place. So we actually ended our season on a win, and that pushed us up an extra win, 35-1 for the season. So it was a miracle run from a small junior college in Spartanburg, South Carolina.
So when you're in school, what's your thought in terms of career direction? What did you want to do when you got to college? Did that change at all as you went through college? And then just talk a little bit about the process where you got to where you are today in terms of staying involved in the game of basketball.
Good question. So after our year at Spartanburg Methodist, I didn't have like super great numbers, and I was, just looking back at it, we were playing more team ball, like as if we were at a 4-year. So I had the chance to go to Limestone College, D2 in Gaffney, South Carolina. And I had some other more tryout options, but nothing that I really wanted to go do. And I kind of had that same mantra in my head. Like, I had good grades. I didn't necessarily need to play basketball. So I ended up going to University of South Carolina Upstate, and I had a chance to be a practice player for Converse College at the time. And Converse College is an all-girls school, so they introduced me to girls basketball. So I was a practice player my junior year of college, not playing basketball anymore. Did that for a year. Then my senior year, Converse College hired a new coach, a lady named Beth Kuchar. And prior to her coming to Converse College, she had coached at Butler University for 10 years. She was the head coach there for 10 years. Got fired, and that's just part of the industry. But she ended up coming to Converse College. And I was like, man, I really think I may want to be a coach after school. This is a good opportunity to kind of be an extra lending hand for us. So I just went and asked her one day early in the preseason, like, hey, now, this is what I want to do after school. Can I come just be of assistance to you when you're out anyway? And she said, yeah, come anytime you want. So I kind of took that as like, I'm coming every day. And I ended up being basically a full-time volunteer assistant for her. I was at every game, every practice, learning the basics of recruiting, got to sit in on some of her talks with recruits coming on campus, doing on campus stuff, looked at how she ran practices, how she ran programs. So that was my first start as a full-time assistant my senior year of college.
So were there things about coaching once you got into it that you didn't expect in terms of some of the job requirements, the job description, things that you were doing that when you were playing you may have had no idea that coaches had to do?
Oh yeah, 100%, man. Pretty much the whole industry. Anything outside of being on the basketball court, just obviously the politics. That's in everything you do. Just how you go about, building a network of people. Obviously, looking for different jobs. How to become better as a person. Like as a coach, you got to develop all the time and remain relevant because basketball is always shifting and changing. So really just the professional development was big for me. I didn't understand that until I got in it.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that it's interesting that you were able to recognize that early, because I think a lot of times, especially with somebody who's played the game before, you kind of come into it and you think, boy, I know a whole lot about this. And the fact that you were kind of able to step back and realize, hey, there's a lot for me to learn. What part of it did you enjoy the most that first year? What aspect of that first coaching job did you say, boy, I really enjoy this?
I would probably believe now say the on-campus recruiting, just taking the kids through, the recruits through campus, kind of how we did it, how we mapped it out. Should we eat here? Should we eat there? What time should we do it? I never realized how much of a strategy it was until that first year we were doing it. And how many different ways you can do it right and how many different ways you can do it wrong. So, that was probably the most intriguing part for me.
What were some things that, in your mind, what makes for a good recruiting visit on campus and what makes for a bad recruiting visit on campus?
Good question. I really think it's about pre-mapping everything out. Like if you know you're going to the dorms, go over there and make sure it's unlocked. If you know you're going to show different buildings, make sure it's unlocked. Go ahead and don't kind of put everything on a whim, have everything mapped out for the day and everybody notified multiple times during the week, the day before and the day of. Like, you got to make sure everything's lined up. You want the recruit to feel like everything's in order. Obviously, making them feel wanted. And obviously, recruiters change over the years. So any personalized touches you can make that's quote unquote legal within a rule, I would say make it.
How difficult was it in that first year to learn those rules, to make sure that you were following the protocol? How did you learn what was and wasn't permissible as you were going through and putting together a recruiting visit for somebody?
Good question, man. I obviously had to take the recruiting test. I didn't know much about that, but I ended up passing it first try. But to be honest with you, we didn't have like a huge budget, so we weren't like super creative, but I was always good on the computer, so I ended up putting together a slide deck for us that we used and would always kind of change and alter. So we really didn't have a huge budget to break any rules anyway. So if anything I thought may have been fringe point, I would just ask her. And like I said, previous to that, she had been a head coach at other places, but was also at Butler for 2 years, so she kind of knew the do's and don'ts.
Yeah, I got you. What about it? Was there some aspect of that first year of coaching that you were like, man, this is a part of coaching that I could do without, that maybe you didn't enjoy as much?
Good question, man. So it was my whole life had been a part of winning programs, and she had got there. The school hadn't won more than I think like 4 or 5 games in the season. They had been around for a long time. So we went through. That was my first time going through a losing season with a program that was going through a rebuild. She had just got there. That was her first year, so that was probably the toughest part. Just losing on a constant basis without much control of it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. How did you guys as a staff, what do you go about doing to try to turn that thing around? And then what are the conversations like in the coach's office after practice, after games, when you're going through a losing season? How did you guys cope with that?
Really, we didn't try to harp on the stuff we did wrong in all the games. We always try to build the players up and try to keep them bought in during practice. Obviously, we weren't like a super, super talented team, so we don't want to go so far talent-wise. So we would throw different strategies out there, just really try to develop the players, but really a lot of the focus was on recruiting and just building up the culture and the mantra of the program. So spent a lot of time doing that and not necessarily focusing on moving off.
All right, so obviously the recruiting side is where you're going to end up at some point here in the journey. So talk to me a little bit about how you went about putting together your initial list of recruits, because that's one of the things that I'm always fascinated by when I talk to college coaches is where do you get that initial list of players that you should consider? Is that done through your connections with local high school coaches? Is that done through scouting services? How do you go about as a college coach at the level you were coaching? How do you put together that list of recruitable players that you're considering?
That's a great question. So I'll start kind of when I felt like I was in my prime of recruiting. It was right before I started my service. The way I recruited when I first started was different than the way I started, than the way I feel in college coaching. So I would say the way I ended was I had a huge network of travel coaches, and I watched any and every college tape that was sent to me. But I had a huge network of travel coaches up and down the East Coast, Midwest, some on the West Coast, that I had a big enough pool of people to say, hey, this is what I need, what you got, if that makes sense.
Makes sense.
And also, I recruited I was from South Carolina. I went up and down the East Coast as far as coaching wise, so I would always recruit the region that I was from. South Carolina, knew about all those kids, especially on the girls' side. At that time, probably 3 or 4 years ago, it wasn't as popular as it is now, so a lot of those kids were in the North Carolina region.
So once you have that initial list, what was the process like for going out onto the road or watching tape? What are some of the things that you were looking for, both from a skill set standpoint and then also maybe from an intangible standpoint when you're having conversations with AAU coaches or high school coaches or the players and their parents? What are the things that you're then using to narrow down that list of who you really want to zero in on?
Good question. I always had a really good eye for talent. I don't know if it's just being a former player myself, but I always look at the top team in our conference, and I'm like, can this kid help us beat the top team? If not, then we don't need to recruit. We can't get anybody mediocre. And obviously, circumstances happen. You got to go deep in your list, whatever. But out the gate, we got to try to go after the top kids. So that was kind of my barometer. Now, looking at the top team that we played, I'm like, can this kid hang with those kids, or would it be able to hang in a year or two?
Yeah, that's a really good way of looking at it. I've never heard anybody say that, but it makes a ton of sense if you think about if I'm a middle-of-the-road program or I'm a program at the bottom of my league, and I want to get up to the top of that league and beat the teams that are up there, then I got to compare the players that I'm recruiting to the players that team is currently putting out there on the floor. Makes a lot of sense using that as a barometer of trying to figure out who you need to bring in. This is a question that I think a lot of coaches, and it's one that I like to ask to people who have coached the college game or are currently coaching at that level. When you start thinking about balancing your evaluation between watching a player play AAU basketball and watching a player play high school basketball, how much do you weigh what they do in one versus the other? And then when you're watching a high school game or an AAU game, are you looking for different things depending upon which one of those two situations that they're in? In other words, when you watch their high school game, are you looking for one thing out of them? And then when you're watching an AAU game, are you looking for something else? If that question makes sense.
No, it definitely does. I didn't really look for anything different for the game. I'm mostly watching the player. Like, for instance, when I was at the University of Charleston, we would bring kids in for a workout. And this may sound kind of basic, but we would have them push the ball up from one end of the floor to the other with their left hand multiple times to see if they can actually do it. That makes sense. Like, a lot of kids can maybe take 1 or 2 dribbles with their left hand, but it gets real kind of funky when you say push it up full speed with your left hand. If that makes sense. So in the game, I'm watching for that stuff. If they're driving right and they look strong, and they go to the left and the ball's like bouncing above their head or fumbling off their knee after 2 dribbles, because you can't dribble with your left. I'm seeing if you can pull up left or right. I'm seeing what do you do when you get to the paint? Are you going to try to bulldoze through somebody, or are you going to float it, or Euro? So really just seeing if you make good decisions. It really didn't matter the level of who you're playing against. I could kind of judge. I was always a good judge of speed, and if I felt like it would translate over to what we were doing in college level.
What kind of questions would you ask of a high school coach or an AAU coach when you're recruiting their players? Were you talking to them about work ethic, love of the game, intangibles? What are some of the things that you would ask those coaches?
Good question. I never really asked them their opinion on talent because I feel like that was up to us as a coaching staff to make. We don't use their opinion based on what I saw. If that makes sense. What I was, like I said, I was asking, is the kid a gym rat? Does she got any trouble? Is she malbag? Is she a quiet person? What do you think is next in her development? Really just kind of some of those personal questions so we know what type of kid we're getting, kind of what we're going to have to deal with or build up in the kid when they get to campus.
All right, talk a little bit about some of your other stops as an assistant coach, what you learned at each one of those along the way.
Good question. So I went from Converse College to be a GA at Walsh University. Really didn't realize what I was walking through at the time, but I walked into a really, really good program under Coach career, and I ended up getting the chance to be the GA, which is kind of I did a lot of the dirty work, but I also got to be the JV head coach. So that was my first time being the head coach of the JV team. Really not a lot of pressure to win games. It's really just more for a revenue thing. But we ended up winning like 4 out of 8 games or something like that. But it was super fun being able to run my own practice. I think we would practice like once or twice a week. I always didn't have to be a mean guy. It would be super fun. That's kind of my personality. We just played games, so that was fun. Being able to kind of set up my own little system, run my own practices, get my feet wet in that nature. Also got to do a little bit of recruiting there. That was more of just like stationary work, sending out stuff, mailing stuff, kind of learning the organization of the recruiting. Then I ended up going to University of South Carolina Upstate, and that's kind of when I think I was able to get free reigns. Coach Tammy George kind of threw me on the road and like, hey, go find me some kids. This is what we need. So that was probably my first. Upstate was probably my first time getting my feet wet really on recruiting. From there, I went to Winthrop University here, and then I ended up going to the University of Charleston. Got my hands in everything there from scheduling to recruiting to.
Did you have an idea as you were going through this that at some point in your career, did you have a goal in mind of being a head coach at some point?
I would say, yeah, I did want to be a head coach, but really I wanted to coach I wanted to coach at the P5 level and be an assistant, just to, be in the league, be in the big leagues with the top minds, quote unquote top minds in basketball, even though we all know there's great minds at the lower levels too. But just for me, that's where I wanted to be. Or obviously, once I got through with Charleston, I definitely could have saw being an assistant there. I could definitely see myself being a head Division II coach at the time.
So how do you end up making the decision that you do, and where does Hoop Juice come into the story?
Good question. So I was at the University of Charleston in Charleston, West Virginia. I'm not sure if you've ever been there, but there's not a lot in the city or town. Not a lot to do with it.
I've driven through there many times, and when I was younger, I think I stayed at a hotel in Charleston, West Virginia, on my very first trip to Hilton Head as a kid. So yeah, so I've been there. I can vouch for the fact it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot going on there.
Yeah, not a super great place. The school is nice, the arena is nice, AD was nice, the boss was great. But all of my family was down in South Carolina. That's where I'm from. So I saw a gap in the recruiting world. I know there's lots of media outlets, scouting services for guys basketball, but you can probably count on your hand the actual legitimate women's basketball scouting service / recruiting service that are out there. So I looked at that. Also saw the NCAA transfer portal was introduced in October 2018, and I saw that as a major shift and problem for high school kids. And obviously at that time, the rules are they as now, where you have to transfer Division I to Division I to sit out. But obviously we all know that's going to change at some point where kids can go D1 to D1 without sitting out, and that's obviously going to be a huge change in recruiting for high school kids. So I know there's a lot of kids that need help. I know how to find kids that nobody is watching or seeing. So I turned it into a business in so many words. I do highlight tapes. I do college placement, which is the biggest thing. I try not to identify myself too much as a recruiting services. I don't do like huge write-ups on random kids. I really focus in on the kids that are my clients and the parents who are registered with me. So it's all huge gap there.
All right. So just to make it clear for people who maybe aren't as familiar with what a recruiting service actually does, and you kind of hinted at it there. So when you are going out and you talk about your clients, you have somebody that you are helping them with the process of transitioning from high school basketball to college basketball, trying to get them the opportunity to have that, whether it's a scholarship or just an opportunity to play. What are the things that you're doing for a player when they become a client of Hoop Juice?
Good question. So we're talking about my full college placement service. First thing I do is I evaluate them myself, and I say, hey, this is the level that I think you can play at. And before they even sign on to the account with me, we have to be agreed upon that they're okay with me pushing them towards that level. Obviously, a lot of kids have big dreams, want to go to Duke, UNC, wherever. And I'm like, that's just not where you're at right now.
All right, let me interrupt you there, because I think this is a great point that you're about to make, and I just want to put some emphasis on it. Tell us about those conversations, what that conversation looks like, because we all know anybody who's been out on the youth basketball AAU circuit knows that there is a ton of overinflated opinions about what players can and can't do and the levels they can and can't play at. And very oftentimes there is a disconnect between reality and what the player thinks they can do, just as you just described, the player who thinks they can play in the ACC, but really they should be focused on trying to be a Division III player. So just tell us your approach with having those, what I'm sure at times are difficult conversations for players and parents to hear.
Good question, man. So honestly, it's not too much of a difficult conversation for me because it's addressed in the beginning. So I'll say, hey, send your highlight tape over, let me watch it before we talk. How I can help you, what I can do, and what I think you can play. And I said, hey, this is the level I think you can play at. Are you okay with me pushing towards that level? If they say no, I think I'm better. I say, hey, maybe it's probably not a good fit for you. But if anything changes in the future, I'm always here. And someone say, okay, can you explain to me why you think that? And I'm like, hey, I'll send them some video. Like, here's a Division I high major level player that's averaging 20-something in high school. Do you think you play like this? And they'll say, no. I'll send them a Division III player. Here's a highlight tape I did for a kid. This is where they went. This is who you look like. You think you identify with them? Yeah, I do. Well, there you go. So.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. I think being able to see, because I think that's something that we've talked to some other coaches about that, and maybe not as much on the girls' side, but certainly on the boys' side, where you'll have a player that thinks they're a Division I player, but really they're probably more suited to be a Division III player, and they may have never even seen a Division III game in their life. And so they have no idea what the quality of play is at that particular level. And I think it's eye-opening for players and parents to be able to see what each one of those levels looks like. And for you to be able to put that together and say, hey, look, here's a player who's playing at the Division III level. Compare yourself to that player. And let's put it this way. You got to be pretty darn good to identify as being a lot better than a Division III college basketball player if you're an average high school player that's out there trying to think about being recruited.
Oh, yeah, I 100% agree. And I always word it like this, too. I was like, everybody develops in different phases. If you go look at the top player on the Division II roster, for some of the top programs, they're probably mid-major level players at that point by the time they're juniors and seniors. They come in as D2 level players, and you leave more than likely as a low major and mid-major Division I player. It's just everybody's at different stages at different times. Yeah,
no question about that. I think that's a great point. How did you go about, when you first had the idea, how do you take Hoop Juice from a thought in your head to an actual business? What did that process look like?
Good question. So I kind of started mapping it out in January, in the spring. I'll say December, January, Christmas break. I had a little downtime from the season. I started mapping it out on paper and started looking up LLCs and all that stuff that goes with it. But also, I had a couple kids hit me up that I was recruiting in the past that let me know they were transferring and they were going to need some help. in the fall, whatever, this relationships I have with parents. So I was like, man, there's an opportunity there. Like, the transfer portal had just came out. There were a bunch of coaches that had no logins, didn't understand how it works, so on and so on. So, I took those initial 2 kids, helped them out, use them as success stories, which, I guess you could say use, but I ended up getting a full scholarship to go elsewhere. And just kind of roll with it.
All right. So what does it look like when you onboard somebody as a client? So the first thing you do before they even come on is you make sure that you guys are on the same page in terms of what the level is that you're looking to help them get to. So once you've determined that, what are the next steps in the process? What is it that you actually do to help them get to where they want to go?
Good question. So I'll start with a lot of the kids. I have to reconstruct the highlight tape they made, and some kids don't have any. So I'll rebuild the highlight tape myself. I usually take anywhere from 5 to 10 games, build it out. I'd like to build an offensive-based highlight tape. I'm not a believer that defense is going to get you a scholarship on the highlight tape. But where the coaches want to see that, and they all putting all these great tweets out there. I bet you none of them have offered a kid from defense. But that's thought for another day. But I always put together offensive-based highlight tape, and my thought as a college coach was, I can teach you defense when you get there if you're somewhat athletic. I'm going to have trouble teaching you offense. So that's why I put together offensive-based highlight tapes, and I'll start sending it around to my network of coaches, and then as they get fed in, I get feedback, like, hey, give me some full game. I'll have 2 full game links on YouTube ready to send out as well. And obviously, I have everything around it. I use a little bit of Twitter, a little bit of email, a lot of phone call, a lot of text. And I let the parents know up front, this could be a 2-month process, or it could be a full 1.5 year process. I can't put a stamp on it. Every college coach uses their own rate, and everybody's process is different. So I make sure that's known early in the process as well, so there's not any surprises. So
what does the communication with the parent and the player look like as you're going through and you're doing this? Tell me about how you're keeping them informed about sort of what you're doing. In other words, if you're sending tape to 6 coaches, are you letting them know all the places that those tapes are going out to? Are you discussing with them, hey, do you want me to reach out to this particular school? How does that piece of it work?
Good question. So I initially do onboarding with them, and they'll fill out a form of I'll say probably about 30 or 40 questions. So it'll go back to the 9th grade year. I'll say, what schools have emailed you, called you, text you, or done any communication with you since the 9th grade year? Then I'll say, hey, give me 10 schools that you can see yourself at based on the level that we discussed that you're a good fit for. So I'll use that list of schools. I'll have their name, email, phone number. So that's kind of how I attack it. I don't necessarily send them a list of people I'm contacting for them, because I know they'll get antsy and start asking for updates after updates. I'm like, it's a process. Even sometimes when I send a film to a coach, I'm not necessarily going to check it out right away. It's the long-term follow-up game that I play to get the coaches to watch the film as well. So,
what does that look like? So you send them the initial tape, and clearly, in some cases, they're coaches that you have a relationship with prior, where they trust your judgment and your evaluation, and they're going to take what you give them, let's say, a little bit more seriously. What about if you're reaching out to a school or a coach that maybe you don't have a prior relationship with? If you don't hear back from them, what's the follow-up look like?
I usually give it a week. And you said a new coach?
Yeah, like a coach that you maybe didn't have a prior relationship with, who you're kind of, you're sending them a tape. Maybe it's somebody that just got a new job, somebody that you haven't had a chance to work with in the past. You send them a highlight tape of a player that you're working with, and you don't hear from them after a week or two. What's the follow-up look like?
Good question, man. So I think one thing that helps me is I never blind send. Like, I'll ask them what they need before I send them something.
Gotcha.
To try to build some rapport. So if they say, I need this, I'm like, here's exactly what you're asking for. And if I don't have that type of player at the time, like, for instance, in the 2021 class, I don't have any point guards under my service at this current point. So anybody asking for a point guard, like, I don't have anything for you. If you end up needing a game, I have that. So, but if I don't hear back in a week or two, I'll re-hit them in the same medium that I talked to them, whether it's Twitter DM, text, email, phone call. And if I don't get a response there, I'll go to another medium. And I'll work my way through the coaching staff. If one person don't get back to me, I'll go to the next person and kind of truly do that.
All right. So how do you go about making connections with the players that ultimately end up being your clients? Are you doing that through social media? Are you doing that through being on site on the ground at high school games and AAU tournaments? Are you doing it through your website? Are you doing it through word of mouth or some combination of all those? Just talk a little bit about, I guess, maybe from a business standpoint, we could call it your marketing plan, but how do you find your clients?
Good question, man. Honestly, a lot of it's been social media. Twitter's been huge for me. So anytime I have a success or one of my kids get a scholarship offer, I'm always posting that stuff up, posting up highlight tapes, post up a lot of like recruiting tips, just random recruiting tips for parents to see. So I think I got a lot of followers from that. Like I said, I have a lot of kids. I have kids under my full college special service, and I also have kids who just get a highlight tape from me. Like if there's a Division I stud that's trying to pick up, like go from a mid-major kid to a high-major kid. They'll post my videos and stuff up, and I have my company logo and stuff on there. So get a wide array of kids for sure.
All right. So how'd you learn how to cut up the video and work? What service do you use?
Good question. So I learned, really got good with video during I left Winthrop. And between that time, I was looking for a job before I went to Charleston. So I had about 3.5 months. And I was like, shit, man, I got to get,
It's all right.
I was like, man, I got to get good at something that a lot of people don't have. I was like, man, video is a good thing, graphic design. So I really just sat down and taught myself, again, via YouTube, how to do all that stuff and just got better with time. As far as the programs I use a little bit of Photoshop to cut people out.
Isn't it amazing that that's free? Do you got the pro? Do you got the pro?
Yeah, I got the pro version, and it pays for itself.
Yeah, I'm amazed. Like I use that for all the graphics that we do for the podcast, and I'm amazed at, just like you, how simple it is, and just it's an incredible tool. So any coaches out there who wants to increase their presence on social media, if you're looking for a way to be able to create great graphics, Canva is the way to go. canva.com. It's amazing. Not that they're paying us to advertise, but it's a great service for sure.
The course coming out on how to use Canva for college coaches as well. So that's
absolutely. Yeah, go ahead. That's a good plug. Yeah, I think being able to put together the right videos and understanding what it is that coaches want to see. How much tape? You said you're looking at about 5 to 10 game tapes for each player, and that's what you're pulling the highlights from. When you do that, what things are you looking for? What do you personalize it for a specific coach when they say, hey, I'm looking for a big who can do this, or I'm looking for a wing who can do that? Do you then personalize the highlight tape for that particular coach, or do you more look at trying to highlight the strengths of that particular player, what they do really well?
Good question. I highlight the particular strengths of the player. So I'll usually do 2 highlight tapes, one from the summer and one from the high school season, depending on if they're with me for 3 years or 2 years. So they'll get basically 2 a year, depending on how long they're with the service. And like I said, I highlight their strengths, everything offensive based. So what I do is when I'm watching the highlight tape, I'm just really looking on offensive end. I'm looking to see when the ball goes through the basket. When I see the ball go through the basket, I'll rewind it slightly and see who made the shot. And if that's my kid, I'll break it up. And I have a little technique I do to watch the film, which I'm sure nobody wants to hear, but I look at the main baskets and also look at who threw the assists and see if it's one of my players. So I always do call a playmaking section, and I'll have obviously made shots and they're broken down with 3 playups and post moves.
How long does it take you to go through those 5 to 10 games and put together the highlight tape?
I'm scared to take it because I make a lot of highlight tapes and I charge good money, but it probably takes me about, I can probably get through a full game in about 15 minutes based on the way I make the highlight tape.
Yep.
I mean, I'm zooming out. I probably made like 20 or 25 in the year 2020 alone. So I've got pretty quick at doing them. Obviously, it's still a time-consuming task, and we're looking at about 10 games and making sure. I mean, that product you're looking at is going to get a kid a scholarship opportunity. So I make sure it's 100% right. I'm not skipping stuff because these are my clients and my people, so I'm making sure it's right. So I can probably get through one in about 15, 20 minutes. I can get through the game.
Yeah, it's amazing, I think, how much better you get at things like that the more you do it. I know that Jason and I have talked about here on the podcast. You think about the editing process for getting an episode to sound good, and we think about what that was like in the first, let's say, 50 episodes where we really had no idea what we were doing, and it would take hours to go ahead and get the sound quality to sound pretty bad. And now we can do the same thing in a half hour and make the sound really good, just because, again, you get more experience with it, and that allows you to be more efficient with your time. As you're working with your clients, what's the relationship like that you build with the player and their parents as they're going through the process with you? And then what's the follow-up with them once they're at the school where you help them to get a scholarship or get an opportunity to play? How do you maintain, or do you maintain, is there a need to maintain that relationship with the player once they've secured their opportunity to play college basketball?
Good question. Honestly, the kids don't hit me up too often unless they get stuck on a text from a coach. Like, what do I say here? What questions can I ask when I talk to this coach? So I'll answer any of those questions the players have. For the most part, they're pretty relaxed. It's really the parents that ask all the questions. And what is this? What does this mean? What is recruiting shutdown? What is the September 1st date? Why didn't I get a call? All that good stuff. So I get a lot of stuff from the parents. But as far as when they get to school, once they sign their name or national intent contract is closed on my end. I'll do some follow up for referral purposes, but once that relationship that kind of closes the relationship as far as the work I'm doing for them. And oftentimes the parents will say, if you ever need me as a reference, I'll be more than happy to do that. So I'll use those that what I did for their daughter, and they're willing to vouch on my behalf as well. All the time, actually, that anybody not going to do this.
Gotcha. What's the funniest question that a parent's ever asked you?
Funniest question. That's a good question. A lot of the conversations are very repetitive. I get a lot of calls once July's over and panic mode. We gotta come back to that one. I don't know.
All right.
I don't know the answer to that.
So do you think when you're talking to people and they're going through and they're trying to decide whether or not they're going to go through the process and they're going to hire you and they're looking to get this opportunity, what does it look like when you sit down and you're having these conversations with parents, you're having these conversations with players? When you talk to them, what percentage would you say of the players are realistic? And when I say players, I'm including their families in this. At what percentage of them agree with your assessment of what level they should play at, if you could throw a percentage on it? So out of whatever 100 conversations, how many times do you and they agree about the level where they think that you can play?
I would say probably about 65% of the time, because I'll kind of lay it out for them. They'll come to me late, and I was like, well, the reason you probably have nothing is you've been going to the wrong boot camps, you've been emailing the wrong level schools. And I'll lay out a player very similar to them that came to me with a situation similar to theirs. And I was like, this is what they were doing at first before they got with me, and this is what you should be doing here. So I got enough examples under my belt now where I can find a relatable situation to any transfer kid at any level, any 2021 kid, any rising junior, any rising senior.
So in your opinion, how important is it for a player to get on the, quote, right AAU team and make sure they're playing in the right tournaments to be seen by the level of college coaches that they're capable of playing for? How much advice do you give out in that area?
Good question, man. This may sound crazy, but I think nowadays kids could skip high school basketball if they wanted to and just play travel basketball, which obviously nobody would do that, but that's how big travel basketball has become. Because the thing is, on the women's side, you have a lot of mega tournaments. When I say that, you're talking 30 to 100 court tournaments, or even 8-9 court tournaments where you can see a lot of kids at once in the summer. Versus during the high school season, I always tell the parents that coaches are in their own programs and they're trying to maintain their job. So they got to worry about the kids, they got to worry about winning, they got to worry about mutual kids or okay, but in the summer, for the most part, the kids are not there. They're only there during a portion of the time, so they can focus all their efforts on food. They and focus.
Yeah, that makes sense. When you think about the future of Hoop Juice, have you thought at all? I know most of your connections at this point because your coaching experience was on the women's side. Have you thought about expanding at any point to the men's side of the game and working with high school male players, just doing the same thing that you're doing, but just doing it on the other gender?
I actually have, and when I first started with Juice, I was doing guys and girls. Didn't get a lot of guy clients, but I've narrowed my niche down to just stay focused on women because it's so big. A lot of people probably don't know this, but the women's side on the Division I level has 15 scholarships, whereas the men have 13. There's more scholarships to hand out on the Division I level on the women's side than the men's side. So, but yeah, I'm going to stay focused on the women's side. And I think one thing for me is I'm trying to get away from the straight up college placement where it's me using my connection to get kids places. You get more to an education standpoint of how parents can not use a recruiting service if you start early enough. And this is what the process looks like. If you don't want to use the service, this is what you got to do 2 or 3 years out.
Yeah, to me, I think that would be tremendously valuable because especially if you're a parent who it's your first child or maybe you've never had a kid, which in most cases this is going to be true. If you've never had a kid who is recruitable as an athlete, in this case a basketball player, when they haven't gone through the process, I'm sure you found, and it's the reason why you're putting together what you're putting together, the fact that parents are very, very uneducated about the recruiting process. And so I would think that if you were able to put something together that parents could utilize as a resource in order to become more educated, that would be tremendously, tremendously valuable. So just talk a little bit about what that's going to look like as you put that together.
Good question, man. And it's something I'm actually mapping out now to hope to launch in January of 2021. But it's really going to be everything, basically with the system I run to get the kids recruited. I'll show people how to make their own highlight tape. There's really a couple simple functions that you need in the program to be able to make a highlight tape, what to put in there, what not to put in there, and just pretty much how to do it from top to bottom. This is the program you can use. I'll explain the whole recruiting calendar. I'll explain how to use the different social media outlets, and not only how to use them, but how to use them properly. Like one thing a lot of people don't know is when you're using these social media outlets, you should not post a YouTube link to social media outlets. Social media outlets will give more love to the post and show it to more people if the raw video file is posted on the profile, not the YouTube link, because the social media platforms don't want people leaving their platform. Like Twitter doesn't want people going to YouTube. So if you post a raw video, you'll get more shares and more views from people. So just some of those small tips, email templates, and pretty much any and everything with recruiting, breaking down what a Division II scholarship is, academic and athletic money. Division I is all athletic. Division III is no athletic. Ivy League is this. NEI is this. USC-A is this. Pretty much any and everything to do with recruiting, I want to put it all in a nutshell. And also want to branch into other sports as well.
How many of the parents that you've worked with over the course of the existence of Hoop Juice would you say had a pretty good handle on all the things that you just described in terms of understanding the recruiting process? Is there more than a handful that really fully understood it?
I would probably say about 10%. Some may be strong in some areas, and some may not be strong in others. Like I see a lot of parents like running kids' Twitter profiles nowadays, which is funny to me. And I guess they think coaches don't realize that we know how kids tweet, like they don't talk about themselves.
Right.
And some of these parents kind of do stuff, but yeah, just really coaching them through like how often you should use social media, what should be on there, how to post your game stats without looking like you're bloating, how to show other people to share your stuff because they may have connections that you don't have. So.
Have you had conversations with parents about the things that they themselves put on social media or their behavior at games? Because oftentimes I think in today's society, when we think about sort of the parent gone bad type of thing, where their behavior in the stands or the things that they're posting on social media may detract from a college coach wanting to recruit them. Have you had to have any of those conversations? Maybe not specifically with a parent because of something you saw, but is that something that you kind of talk about with the parents of the girls that are part of your service?
Not necessarily their actions in games, because a lot of my clients I never meet in person.
Okay.
Like I've got kids, I live in Georgia, but I got kids in Florida, Virginia, Ohio, had a kid out in Oregon last year, New York, Texas, wherever. And if I see them acting out of line, I'll say, hey, this is, you can act how you want, but this is what you're doing to your baby girl recruiting. So that's kind of how I'll handle it. And obviously I tell all the kids to do a social media cleanup. And I'll show them how to do what they call, Google researching on profile and see if you have any cuss words, anything about sex, or anything that's just out of left field that needs to be taken down to try to help the process of the
Yeah, it's amazing, I think, how important social media has become in the recruiting process. And just when you think about being a college coach and having to manage that, I think if kids can hear from someone like yourself early about, hey, these are the things that it's good to use social media for, and here's some things that you should try to avoid. I'm sure that although that helps them in the recruiting, I'm sure that when they finally get on campus, I'm sure that their college coach appreciates the fact that they've already sort of been trained, for lack of a better word, in what they should and shouldn't be doing on social media. You want to make sure you get that before it becomes a problem and ends up impacting that young lady's future and their opportunity to play college basketball. As you start to look ahead, Tobias, at what you want to do with Hoop Juice in the future, I want to ask you a final question here just about where you see Hoop Juice going in the future and what's your biggest challenge moving forward, and then what's your biggest opportunity that you see to continue to grow your business? So the biggest challenge and the biggest opportunity that you see going forward.
Great question, man. I think the biggest challenge for me is to run and grow amongst my friends. I got to hire some people to work with me. I've been running a solo man band right now. Definitely
Understood.
Not operating the most efficient way I can. Like I do the highlight page, I do the marketing, I do the sales, I do Twitter. I'm doing everything. So working on hiring a small team around me that I can outsource some stuff to that doesn't necessarily need my touch on it. I can just review it. So the first thing would be, I guess, getting a team around me. And the biggest avenue I see for growth, actually during the pandemic, I saw a lot of AAU tournaments and stuff being canceled. I ended up going to camps that I thought went pretty well. That's helped a lot of kids with pennies on the dollar. I call it combine. I do a combine in Columbus, South Carolina, which is from Greenville, South Carolina, my home area. And I had one down here in Atlanta. I think I ended up getting probably about 70 to 80 kids total. And I ended up doing a free live stream for all the kids. They got free access to the games. I think it's insane that you kid has to pay for their own, but that's worth another day. Posted up on social media, seeing evaluations of college coaches. So I think it turned out to be a great event. So I think that'll be something I'll try to do to different states, up and down the Southeast, and try to help out kids. And like I said, get away from that one-on-one college placement stuff and more about the education and trying to help kids on the masses who come to my stuff.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's a really good idea, is to be able to sort of increase your impact by being able to put something together where even if somebody's not working with you directly in person, instead they're still able to benefit from the expertise that you can bring. Before we wrap up, Tobias, I want to give you a chance to share where people can find out more about what you're doing, share your websites, share all your social media contacts. Just let people know where they can find out more about Hoop Juice and more about all the great things that you're doing.
Oh, yeah, 100%, man. First place you can find me is hoopjuice.com. Lays out my phone number, email, contacts, and stuff I've been doing with clients. So hoopjuice.com is the first place. Twitter is another big spot for me. So that's twitter.com/hoopjuice_. Just converted my IG page from my personal one to a business one. So that's brand new, and that's at Hoop Juice Recruiting. I'm also on LinkedIn and Facebook under my name, Tobias Pinson. Wherever you type in Hoop Juice Recruiting, my name on any social platform, I'll pop up.
Awesome. Fantastic. Tobias, we cannot thank you enough for spending an hour of your time with us tonight. We really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun getting to know you and learn more about the services that you're providing to young ladies who are trying to get a college basketball opportunity. So we really appreciate that. And to everyone out there, thanks for listening, and we will catch you on our next episode. Thanks. If you have an existing podcast or are looking to launch your own pod but aren't sure where to start, the team at My Podcast Manager can help. Our podcast team works behind the scenes so you can do what you do best. We'll help you launch your podcast, make it sound great, and free up your time for the more enjoyable parts of podcasting. If you're ready to put your podcast editing, production, and promotion on autopilot with a trusted team of podcasting professionals, visit mypodcastmanager.com to get started.
Thanks for listening to the Hoop Heads podcast, presented by Head Start Basketball.